Prairie falcon crouching over its kill, and gliding overhead a red-tailed hawk, its wingtips reaching out like fingers. When it comes to aerial warfare, the hawk is a flying fortress, bristling with defenses, while the falcon attacks like a reckless missile. It plunges through the western sky, pulls itself up, and plunges once again. The falcon and the hawk are not enemies, just fierce competitors. They compete for nesting space and room to hunt for food. This is the story of a living arrangement, the life story of two birds of prey. Just west of the Rocky Mountains in the high rimrock country of Wyoming lies the aerial domain of the red-tailed hawk. The red-tail is the most widespread and adaptable hawk in North America. It can be found in nearly every region. It is particularly common here, soaring above the mesas and buttes of the Green River Plateau. Hawks and other birds of prey have the keenest eyesight of any creatures on Earth. They see at least 5 times as acutely as we do. From 200 feet in the air, the hawk takes in the slightest movements, a robin turning its head, or the cautious twitching of its favorite prey, the ground squirrel. A band of horses approaches, wild mustangs, as free-roaming as the hawk. The noise of their hooves kicks up a flock of sage grouse. This is the cue for the hawk's rival, the prairie falcon. As the game bird slows to land, the falcon strikes. Its claws quickly squeeze out the other bird's life. The prairie falcon, though only half the size of the red-tailed hawk, is the more ferocious predator. It weighs scarcely more than a pound, but it will bring down grouse and pheasants that weigh 2 and 3 times that. Like all birds of prey, it has large, piercing eyes and a sharply hooked beak for tearing up its catch. Falcons prefer to carry their prey to a safe perch before eating. But in this case, the game bird is too heavy. The falcon will pluck and eat it where it lies. It is spring in southwestern Wyoming, breeding time for the birds of prey. This spot, a steep mesa overlooking a cottonwood gulch, is home to both the falcon and the hawk. The red-tail is always the first to arrive from its winter migration. This female and her mate have selected a familiar cottonwood tree for their nest. They have built here before, and this year they had only to add a few sticks and plump them down before the nest was ready to occupy. After mating, the female lays from 1 to 4 eggs. She broods them for a month while her mate brings her food. Birds of prey defend 2 kinds of territories: a broad home range for hunting and within that a smaller area known as the nesting territory. The hawk's nesting territory takes in the whole length of the mesa. No other red-tailed is permitted to enter. The prairie falcon's nesting territory overlaps that of the red-tails, which means that the two pairs keep each other under constant surveillance, even as they guard the territory against outsiders. Prairie falcons don't build nests. They seek out holes in the cliff face and lay their eggs inside, after scraping out shallow depressions in the sand. As with the red-tails, the female incubates, and the male hunts for both of them. During the breeding season, the male prairie falcon is apt to do a bit of showing off. This is the breathtaking appeal of the sport of falconry. The bird climbs to a certain height, tucks back its sharp wings, and plunges. The dive of the falcon is called a stoop. In full stoop, these birds can reach a speed of 200 miles an hour. Over and over, the falcon rises above the cliff and plummets down the face. It hunts the same way, stooping at top speed onto unsuspecting birds or ground squirrels. The main difference between falcons and hawks is that falcons are designed to take prey on the wing, while hawks are limited to prey on the ground. In the heat of day, bubbles of rising air cause thermal currents, and these power the flight of the red-tailed hawk. The red-tailed is one of the so-called broad-winged hawks. They're relatively large and heavy, and their wings are meant more for soaring than for flapping. Where the narrow-winged falcon seems to carve through the air, the red-tailed floats on top of it. But this time, the red-tailed comes too close to the falcon's eyrie. The female flies out to issue a challenge. The red-tail wheels and tries to face its adversary, but the falcon is already overhead and diving like a kamikaze. For all its aggressiveness, the falcon is careful to avoid the red-tail's talons. The attack was not meant to injure. It was more of a warning to a neighbor. The red-tail has gotten the message. Somewhat ruffled, it settles back on the cottonwood. The falcon is also ruffled, literally so. Each time it lands, it must put its feathers back in order. Without this preening, it could not control its flight. More about falcons and hawks in a moment. Hawks are difficult to tell apart. This species can be light-colored or dark, or in between. The red tail is the one sure clue. Rabbits are wary creatures, always watching and listening for threats around them. They are not prepared for silent threats above them. In slow motion, the hawk glides in. The rabbit bucks wildly like a horse trying to throw its rider, but the surprise of the strike has already sent it into shock. Death usually comes from suffocation. The talons squeeze out the animal's wind. A jackrabbit is a large catch for a red-tail. It generally takes smaller animals, mice, ground squirrels, snakes, and even grasshoppers and beetles. Dry, clear days produce updrafts and strong thermal currents. These are the best times to see hawks soaring in Wyoming. In the morning, the red-tails take 1-hour warm-up flights, and in the midday, when currents are strongest, they may ride them for 2 or 3 hours. Breeding hawks soar together, their talons lowered in a mating display. The afternoon winds lift them nearly out of sight. They would sail until dark, but cooling temperatures and settling air force them down. Red-tails come to their nighttime roost early, leaving the field to the falcons, which do not depend upon currents. Most birds of prey do their hunting from perches. They sit quietly until something catches their eye. In the wild, a falcon misses at least half of its strikes, but this one recovers quickly. On the second pass, it is able to knock the partridge down, turn, and pounce. At the eyrie, the month-old baby falcons clamber forward, anticipating a meal. If the male makes the catch, he plucks it and calls in the female. Only she feeds the chicks. She rips off small chunks and passes them out to the demanding mouths. At this age, young falcons eat twice as much as adults. In another week or two, when their feathers are fully developed, they will eat 3 or 4 times as much. There are already signs of adult behavior, such as mantling. One bird will spread its wings over the food, symbolically hiding it from the others. This part of the West is actually a high-altitude desert, always arid, often cold. It is surprising that so many birds of prey thrive here. This is the Swainson's hawk. Like the red-tail, it belongs to the broadwing family. The Swainson's makes the longest migration of any of our hawks, from Wyoming to Argentina and back. It doesn't return to its nesting territory until weeks after the other hawks. When the female lowers her head and levels her back, she is said to be in her solicitation posture. Her mate responds accordingly. As with most hawks, the male is clearly the smaller of the two. The mating activity of the Swainson's has drawn out the female red-tail. The late arrivals have crowded into her nesting territory, and her shrieks of outrage bounce off the cliff and into the sky. The Swainson's at the height of their breeding season are even more aggressive. Both hawks leap to the defense. Two dive bombs are enough to convince the red-tail that the Swainson's are here to stay. Of course, competition and aggression are not limited to birds of prey. All birds will defend their territories, even against much larger ones. The Swainson's skirmish with the red-tailed has carried it close to the nest of a pair of grackles. It may seem foolhardy for them to attack a hawk, but the grackles have much greater agility in the air. As long as they dive in from behind, they are safe from the Swainson's talons. The magpie is smaller than a hawk and larger than a grackle, and it's probably smarter than both together. This is the pesky scavenger of the West. It steals eggs, feeds on carrion, and generally makes itself unwanted. Perhaps the magpie knows that Swainsons rarely prey on birds, but it keeps to the hawk's rear all the same. In a moment, we'll meet two hawks which the magpie is sure to leave alone. A trickle of water from a hidden spring can transform the dry Wyoming plateau. In this small, marshy pocket, the wildlife is markedly different than that of the surrounding area. The killdeer is a shorebird, normally found near rivers and lakes. It hunts in the shallows for insects, stirring them up with its feet. And the king snake, echoing the stripes of the killdeer with its own black bands. Wetlands have their own aerial predator, the marsh hawk. The marsh hawk's method of hunting is quite unlike that of the broad-winged hawks. It keeps close to the ground, moving back and forth over its range in a slow, regular pattern. From a perch, it would be unable to see movements in the tall grass. It must be directly above its prey. The marsh hawk does more actual flying than the soaring hawks, and for this reason it has a light body and long, narrow wings. When they do soar, marsh hawks fold their tails and cock their wings like falcons. The female of this breeding pair, on the left, is larger and brownish colored, while the male is a grayer tone. The courtship play of the marsh hawks is one of those swirling exercises for which birds of prey are famous. The male rises above and then dives at the female. As he passes, she rolls a full circle and thrusts out her talons. Each time they just miss each other. With birds of prey, courtship is not far removed from aggression. Marsh hawks are unusual in that they nest on the ground. They pick a hidden spot only slightly above the water level. This hawk is classified as a harrier because of the way it flaps and hovers while hunting. Because it is so maneuverable in tight places, it can protect its nest effectively. A magpie would be routed by an angry marsh hawk. It will also attack a man if he comes too close, something that much larger hawks do not dare to do. Just as the marshes have their hawk, so do the larger bodies of water in the West. Overlooking the clear waters of a high country lake is the nest of the fish hawk, or osprey. It's an eagle-sized predator, 2 feet long, with a 5-foot wingspan. The male and female are the same size. When the osprey spots a fish swimming near the surface, it stoops and crashes into the water after it. Its claws and feet are covered with sharp scales for a better grip on its slippery prey. Unlike falcons and hawks, which may share nesting territories with other species, ospreys will tolerate no neighbors. They will even drive off eagles. Because they use it and add to it every year, the osprey's nest grows huge and sprawling, a familiar landmark from any point of the lake. By the time summer is half gone, the young birds of prey are ready to leave the nest and hunt for themselves. In the red-tail's cottonwood, a hawk fledgling practices wing movements. They do this for 2 weeks, building up strength for the big moment. A robin has little to fear from the young hawks. They are still so clumsy that sometimes they fall out of their trees. Unfortunately, half of these fledglings will die before the year is out. Only 1 in 4 will live long enough to breed. The falcon fledglings develop more quickly, and they have begun to master the death-defying stoops of the adult birds. But they too must contend with some long-time enemies, coyotes, owls, and trigger-happy hunters. In addition, young falcons are liable to be trapped and sold to falconers. But for both these birds of prey, the greatest challenge will be each other. The proud and equal competition of the falcon and the hawk. The golden eagle, symbol of imperial Rome, thunderbird to the American Indian, the warrior bird. There is perhaps no other creature which has been so inspiring to men and nations. The eagle is unsurpassed in its mastery of flight. In just a moment, we will learn about its flying and hunting life and see why birds like the golden eagle served as models when men eventually designed their own flying machines. The canyons of the Rocky Mountains and the prairie lands that surround them are the home of the golden eagle. This great bird is first and foremost a keen-eyed hunter. Its head movements are actually a range-finding technique, aligning one image with another to determine distance. The jackrabbits that inhabit the western prairies are its chief source of food. As it cruises over its range, it picks out possible quarry. This rabbit is alert to the danger. Despite the eagle's skill as a hunter, the incredible precision required in making a kill from the air makes a miss as likely as a hit. Deep cover protects this wary rabbit. Stalking on the ground is unusual behavior for an eagle. It may be trying to flush the rabbit out into the open. It works, but suddenly the rabbit bolts. The eagle must get airborne again in order to strike. But the rabbit has a good head start. When an eagle is ready to pounce, it tumbles swiftly from the sky. Its strong feet and razor-sharp talons grab and pierce its prey, squeezing it to death. Other small mammals, like this marmot, are also likely game. But unlike falcons or hawks, it rarely takes other birds. Conditions must be right for a golden eagle to make a kill. There must be updrafts to gain the altitude necessary to spot and dive on its prey, and then to regain altitude to fly off. Eagles seldom dive in the center of a downdraft. They know that they can't fly away. The eagle's aerial maneuvers all have a purpose. Here, the tail acts as a rudder. Eagles eagles are capable of killing even large animals like the young of this deer, but they prefer lighter prey like the ground squirrel, which they can carry back to their cliff-type eyries. This animal dodges, but the eagle changes direction and strikes. Yet the eagle's prey species may be decreasing. Irrigation has turned arid lands into fertile fields. Some observers believe that as scrub land is plowed up and turned into fields, the firm soil is destroyed that formerly permitted small animals to build their burrows. The rabbits and ground squirrels and marmots are disappearing, replaced by flowing fields of wheat. The grain crops do attract mice, but they are not part of the eagle's diet. With farming has come an ecological shift. Smaller birds of prey who eat mice are on the increase, while the eagle is on the decline. Many wild animals accommodate themselves to man's presence, especially in agricultural areas. But the solitary golden eagle cannot compete in a land transformed by feedlots. And now agriculture and ranching are moving to the very edge of the cliffs where eagles nest. To ensure a continuing habitat for golden eagles and other birds of prey, the Department of Interior has established the Snake River Birds of Prey Natural Area in Idaho. Here is a sanctuary for bald eagles as well as golden eagles. This 33-mile-long canyon-land refuge is also home to the prairie falcon seen here killing a pigeon on the wing. Helplessly, the stunned pigeon spirals downward. The falcon strikes again. The wounded pigeon recovers and tries to escape. But the falcon is persistent. It is still in pursuit. Now it grasps its victim in midair and brings it to earth. Partly because of its excellent hunting skills, the prairie falcon population in the West is large and even flourishing. The short-eared owl also lives here, as does the sparrowhawk, sometimes known as the American kestrel. While the Snake River Sanctuary helps protect the golden eagle's nesting area, it does not provide sufficient hunting territory to support the local eagle population. The golden eagle, historic symbol of invincibility, is also vulnerable in other ways. It is not a prolific breeder, and some observers are worried that its ability to reproduce may not keep pace with the losses imposed by man's presence. In just a moment, we'll see how golden eagles breed and raise their young along the ledges of sheer canyon walls. As winter gives way to spring in the mountains where the golden eagle makes its home, the lower slopes shed their mantle of snow, leaving only the peaks white. In alpine meadows, the remnants of once vast bison herds still roam on the National Bison Range. Western painted turtles crowd sunlit logs and rocks to literally warm their blood after a long winter's hibernation. Wildflowers spot the meadows, and the leaves of the blue lupins sway in the warming breezes. The golden eagle is part of that lingering heritage of the West that is still with us in a few precious places. It is the Wild West of nature, vast mountains, tall timber, and prairie grasslands. Home to the pronghorn, the only American antelope, and wapiti, the so-called American elk. but also home to the smaller plant eaters that support the fragile population of eagles. Eagles do not breed until they are around 5 years old. A pair usually has several nests, although generally one favorite nest is used each year for breeding purposes. Eagles mate for life. However, if one member of the pair dies, the other will choose a new mate for the next breeding season. As the eagle matures, it acquires light golden hackles, the neck and crown feathers which give the bird its name. Only 2 eggs are laid as a rule, sometime in March or April. While the eagle's eggs are incubating, these pronghorns will give birth to their young. The lush meadows are part of a complex ecosystem, nourishing a great variety of animals, many of which live as they always have. The basis of all life here is the grass. Normally brown, this is the moment when the landscape is brushed with delicate green. The new grass releases its energy to countless species, in obvious ways to these pronghorn, and in indirect but important ways to the eagle. In fact, the eagle, as we have seen, may need the grasslands more than do the other animals, and for this reason faces a more uncertain future. An eagle chick at birth is almost all white. The heat radiating from its rocky home often makes life uncomfortable. This is the mottled black and white phase characteristic of 6-week-old birds. This mother now has only one nestling to tend, for by this age, the more dominant bird will kill off its weaker sibling, a phenomenon known appropriately as the Cain and Abel conflict. Even at this age, the fierceness which made the eagle the symbol of warriors is plain to see. By now, the meadows are full of new arrivals, like the western killdeer, home from its winter's sojourn to the south. Even the rattler comes out to enjoy the sun. This is wild country still, but the evidence of man is growing as his fences creep out across the landscape. A young eagle becomes fully feathered around 8 weeks. At 10 weeks, it will be ready to fly. Not until man constructed his own flying machines did he begin to understand the aerodynamic principles that give birds their marvelous power. Airplanes have fixed wings, and soaring birds like eagles spend much of their time with their wings fixed. It was just such an example that inspired man's own mastery of flight. To hide its meal from hungry competitors, the eagle, like many other birds of prey, has developed a trait known as mantling. Its huge wings throw a cloak around its food while it feeds. This eagle cries out to defend its catch. It's only a curious pronghorn. The surge of new life is everywhere. It has even reached the sheerest canyon walls, home to cliff swallows as well as eagles. Fledglings instinctively exercise their wings in this way for a period of time prior to leaving the nest. Even after they learn to fly, the young eagles must develop the timing and precision necessary to be skillful hunters. For this reason, the parents will have to bring food to them for some time to come. One young bird instinctively mantles as it begins its meal. A bird's wing is so shaped that air currents striking it will create lift. It also acts to propel the bird forward. When the bird is gliding, the feathers of the outer part of its wing, which are called primaries, are flattened out. The tips are slotted, and this reduces drag and turbulence. The eagle can also decrease the area of its wings, which reduces lift and makes it drop. This majestic posture is the one we associate with the thunderbird, the name the American Indians gave to the golden eagle. which they revered as the messenger of the Great Spirit. When landing, the eagle changes the pitch of its wings in order to slow its speed, analogous to the way a plane uses flaps. As it does so, it employs small feathers called alula at the wing joints, which act to prevent it from stalling. But aerial skill may not be enough to save eagle. In just a moment, we'll see some of the immediate dangers it faces. For thousands of years before European man appeared on the scene, the rivers of the West etched themselves deeper and deeper into the earth, leaving great canyons. It is a land of sheer cliff faces, a forbidding country that was bypassed in the initial settlement of the West. But now men have met the challenge of the Rockies. With rope and pitons, they scale their heights. This golden eagle has been frightened by the climber's rope. But this is no recreational climber, but a biologist working for the Bureau of Land Management. He is actually making his way to the eagle's nest in order to collect data and information on young birds that will help the government develop better ways of promoting the eagle's survival. Although the golden eagle, with an estimated population of 35,000 birds in the United States, is not now an endangered species, it could become one. This young eagle is being weighed. At maturity, a female will weigh up to 12 pounds. A male bird will weigh less, being only 2/3 her size. The distraught mother still circles nearby. While they have no predators except for man, eagles do, like other animals, suffer from disease. This young bird is sick, and so it receives medication which is washed down with a drink of water. It's apparently very thirsty. This may be this bird's first drink of water, because normally young eagles only get water from their food. But it is not disease, but guns that account for most eagles' deaths. Fortunately, legislation now protects the golden eagle from airplane warfare. An estimated 20,000 eagles were killed in airplane shoot-offs between 1943 and 1963. But eagle shoot-offs persist, and an equally dangerous threat is posed by hunters on the ground. Hunting is a major source of recreation and often food for thousands of Americans, young and old. But itchy trigger fingers, ignorance, or perhaps just the tendency to shoot at anything, especially the tantalizing spectacle of a soaring target, combine to produce countless eagle deaths. The shooting goes on. Illegal hunting still accounts for the largest percentage of eagle kills. Another significant threat to eagles are power lines. Eagles electrocute themselves when their wings touch 2 or more wires at the same time. Several hundred eagles are killed this way each year. Marlon Nelson, an internationally recognized expert on birds of prey, and his son Tyler believe this problem can be licked. Using the ancient techniques of falconry, Marland and Tyler Nelson are studying ways power pole construction might be altered to reduce the number of eagle electrocutions. Tyler wears a gauntlet to protect his arm from the eagle's sharp talons. Here he is placing a hood, known as a ruptor, over the bird's eyes, a falconer's device for keeping it calm and immobile until ready for flight. Jesses are tied around the bird's legs. These act like a leash to restrain it until it is time to fly and to secure it upon its return. The Nelsons' backyard experiments have demonstrated that some simple remedies exist to improve pole design in a way that will eliminate or certainly minimize deaths from electrocution. This can be done in several ways, as these experimental poles demonstrate. One way is to install perches above the conductor wires. Another method is to provide larger insulators, placing the wires out of reach or by simply spacing the wires farther apart. To alter every existing pole in the western states would obviously be impossible, but this is not necessary because eagles only use certain poles to hunt from or nest on. Marlon Nelson, in a recent survey for the Idaho Power Company, determined that only 2% of the poles need to be altered. In an enlightened move, the Idaho Power Company is promoting the eagle's survival. Since eagles enlarge their nests every year, they must be trimmed, otherwise they will eventually reach and touch the high voltage conductors. These steel towers may actually be preferable to cliffs as nesting sites, since the air circulates all around them and the young birds are not as exposed to heat as they would be on sun-baked rocks. James Greer is another modern-day falconer who is manning eagles in order to promote their survival. The bird perched on Greer's arm is almost a pet, if the word pet can be applied to a creature as basically wild as an eagle. This bird was hatched in a successful experiment Greer conducted in artificially inseminating eagles. Manning eagles is, at least for Jim Greer, much more than a matter of sport, for he, like others, feels that survival of the golden eagle must ultimately involve much greater dependence on man. Having grown up in close daily contact with Greer, this eagle displays a degree of tolerance and even attachment that is highly unusual. This kind of affectionate behavior is usually reserved for another eagle. But captive breeding is last-ditch insurance against the extinction of a species. The wildness of the eagle preserves at least some sense of the mysterious, but now much diminished power of nature. As nature, most of us can only barely perceive today's rapidly changing world. For this reason, the remaining links assume greater and greater importance. Great creatures like the bison, and the pronghorn, and the wapiti, and the golden eagle capture the spirit of the American West. Their survival is important because, if for no other reason, they are a part of the special character of one of the most spectacular parts of our land.